Right, we want to buckle down to business. You're watching the Leadership Forum here on AM Live, and today we're talking about, of course, embracing national values. And we had this particular clip from the President during his parliamentary speech of the State of the Nation address, where he presented a copy of the report to the Speaker of the National Assembly. I think we will actually, right, we don't have it at the ready right now with the clip, but we'll show you that much later in the course of a program. But that is what we want to talk about today. And we know that the Constitution of Kenya gives prominence to national values and principles of governance. And we know Article 10 of the Constitution, also subsection 2 of the Constitution, provides the national values and principles of governance as follows: patriotism, national unity, sharing and devolution of power, the rule of law, democracy and participation of the people, human dignity, equity, social justice and inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination and protection of the marginalized. We have good governance, integrity, transparency and accountability. Also, we have sustainable development. Article 232 of the Constitution further provides for the principles that inform public service, which include high standards, also high standards of professional ethics, efficient, effective and economic use of resources, responsive, prompt, effective, impartial and equitable provision of services, accountability for administrative acts, transparency and provision to the public of timely acts, transparency and provision of public of timely, accurate information, I should say, fair competition and merit-based appointments and promotions, public participation in policy-making processes, and it goes on and on and on. And of course, we shall hear from our panelists here today to talk us through about what these national values are all about. But before we drill deeper, let's just hear or see that particular clip that we had from the State of the Nation, State of the Nation address from the President.
It is now my honor to present 3 reports to this House as obligated by our Constitution, namely, report on all the measures taken and the progress achieved in the realization of national values. 2, progress made in fulfilling the international obligations of the Republic. And 3, the state of security. Asante. Ingine iko wapi? Where's the other copy? Najua hii ndio mambo inakuja kuleta shida, inasemekana sasa hatutaki Senate. Where's the other copy?
Where's the other copy? We do have the copy here with us, and of course also a person that was involved in that particular committee of coming up with the national values is here with us to talk us through about that particular copy and tell us what is enshrined in the National Values Report. This will be presented to Parliament, and of course you saw the President with the light moment there, of course saying with his tongue firmly in cheek about the Senate and the National Assembly. As we're talking about national values, as a country, have we lost it when it comes to issues of ethics and ethical leadership in this country? Where are we headed as far as, you know, nobility of character is concerned with our leaders? We've seen so many things happening on social media, nudes, also nudity, you know, forums, or maybe they say it's extortionists that were actually trying to, you know, maybe extort money from some of the ministers or governors or deputy governors as well. We want to know, as far as culture is concerned, what are the values of Kenyans? Do we know Vinny, right? And when we talk about values, what do we really mean? It can be such a contentious issue when we're talking about value. What is a value to me? might not be of value to you, and that will be the basis of our discussion this morning. Allow me to introduce our panelists here. We began the program by introducing two of them, Mary Mukindia, who is an executive coach, also and a business consultant. Also, we do have with us Timothy Njoya. Timothy Njoya, of course, is a reverend and a political activist, and he's here to talk about also national values. Dr. Wale Akinyemi, he is the CEO of Power Talks, and we have also Dr. Frank Njenga with us, who is a psychiatrist, and Professor Naomi Damba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KCA University and was heavily involved in coming up with this report on national values. Let's just begin from there, and we hear from Mary Mukindia. First of all, when we talk about national values, what really comes to mind, national values?
Other than, I know what is written in the Constitution, as in Article, 10 of Chapter 2. But really for me is what practices, culture and traits do define us as Kenyans. And those practices, cultures and traits are then what exert influence on us as a people and how we behave. And for me, I think are much more tethered to the past, in that the things were important is things like, marriage, family, to be called mother of, son of, father of. Those are the things that gave us our respect, our social standing, because relationships are so important as Kenyans. Friendships, kingship relationships, those are still and were very important.
Yes.
Things like, morality.
Yes.
Family life. Those are the things that I think are important. That's why, it's, at our age, we get shocked at what we see happening. Things like respect for other people's property. You don't steal.
Yes.
Those things were punished very harshly in our times. And of course, leadership. So for me, those are the things, as I say, how do we practice this? What are traits in practicing those? And those for me are what then define the behavior and still define my behavior and others around me. I know we have what is written in a book. It is written in our Constitution. But really, do we practice that? Do we teach that? Do we embrace it as characteristics and traits? I'm not so sure. Because if we did, then those things would be part of our curriculum from when we start school.
Thank you.
We used to have a course called ethics and, and all that when we were in school. They should be embraced throughout the whole chain. So for me, I'm still more old school on the things that define us. In all cultures, we're multi-ethnic, we're multiracial. I think those things that I've talked about, marriage where human, family comes from, human life, morality, respect for others, property and good leadership. For me, I'm still on that's who we are as a people. Yeah.
Okay, let's hear from Reverend Timothy Njoya. National values, culture, ethics. We have all these words, that are being papered every day through mass media. What do they mean?
Let me just say, culture is a way of expressing the life and the behavior of a particular society.
Yes.
And as such, you can have this in terms of ideas, in terms of law, in terms of values. So values is really one of the components of a culture. And if you read, I'm a student and a scholar of people like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Rousseau, Voltaire, and others, and Immanuel Kant, who followed Aristotle and others, who defined what is to be civilized, what is to be human as opposed to unnatural, as opposed to be unnatural. To be unnatural, not to have culture is to be to have unnatural behavior. And I see the media say people that when there's like a rape or something, this is animal behavior, kinyama, mambo, animal behavior, meaning this not natural, it's not human. We haven't, our constitution didn't define culture. It defines only one component of culture, which requires transparency and accountability. These are public behavior. But when you come to personal behavior, to have predisposition, psychological predisposition,
yes,
to act according to public good, not private good, or to make public good supersede personal interest, at the private interest, that predisposition is cultural. And I would say that in Kenya, we tend to fear law, which says you must behave this way,
yes,
rather than have the proper predisposition, proper beliefs, proper values. And I also want to say that because of that, we lack comparing reasons, cultural ownership of those values. So people, educated people in Kenya are not educated, they are not cultural or civilized. They are simply driven by self-interest. Job seekers are driven by not by public interest. And that is what means we should punish, Kenya should punish and cultural behavior, whether it's written in law or not, because I know that in 1963, when a dam broke in Italy, and it killed, wiped out villages,
yes,
all the engineers and architects and the contractors were sought and imprisoned for life. Why? Because they behaved unnaturally and culturally by not studying the rocks and the soil around that it was right, and cause a tsunami,
yes,
on the lake. In Kenya, we are not going to punish the people who make the houses collapse in Nairobi.
yes,
the people who are engineers and architects, this is elite, who make the dams in Sorai,
yes,
and it wipes out a village, because we put self-interest before culture.
Self-interest
We
before
put
culture.
personal interest, personal good before common good.
Thank you.
And I think when we define culture properly, that common good, we must have all Kenyans, including a child in school, must have predisposition to act according to public interest, according to public good, and put that prior to personal drives.
Thank you. Right, we shall be discussing more. But don't you think maybe Kenyans will take special umbrage with you when you say they're not really cultured? Right? Because culture is amorphous. We cannot really have an ironclad definition of culture.
It's not amorphous. We have beliefs. Like my belief in God compels me to act to God's, according to what I read in the Bible,
Or
in
if
the
I'm an
Quran,
atheist,
as God's will.
I don't believe in God. I
If you don't
don't
believe in
have
God,
to subscribe to your
if you don't
cultured
believe
way
in-
of thinking.
Okay, I was
Yes,
saying that's
yes.
one cultural way of having proper predispositions. The other one is that you don't believe in God. You have to believe that public interest or private common good
Thank you.
supersedes your personal interest.
Fantastic. We shall be discussing this. Let's hear from Professor Noami Damba. And Noami Damba, you can also give us your role. What was your role during the formulation of this particular national values? And we have it here. I can just, if you may just pick it up so that they can see. This is the final draft policy on national values and principles of governance. Expert reviewed panel on the final draft policy, legislation and institutional framework for the national value system for Kenya, Ministry of Justice, National Cohesion and Constitutional Affairs. Professor Noami Damba, you can tell us more about this particular report, and we saw it, the President presenting it to the speakers of both houses. What is entailed in this report?
Allow me to take a little global perspective, give some definition, and then talk about the role of this document.
Just pick one, because we are going on a short break. We won't have that much time, so that we just set maybe as a segue to our discussion later.
Okay.
Just briefly, just tell us about the report.
This report in 2011, the group, and I believe, Reverend, here, you were part of that group, have been working on a national value report that is up to November of 2011. And, it incorporated a very large group of people, about 100 of them. They traveled from county to county. They cover about 30 counties to get their views on what we call national value. The report was compiled together, and I came at the tail end. Ambassador Mina Mohammed and the Minister of Justice at that time invited me to join the group. And my role was to really try to touch the loose end of this report. And so seems to me that toward the end, more people were focused on setting up a commission and their role in that commission. Mm-hmm. And we were missing a very important point, which is to create this national document that will help us beyond that.
Thank you. Right.
But I'll go back to title.
Fantastic. We'll discuss that. Let's hear from Dr. Frank Jenga. Have we lost the plot as a country when it comes to national values? And this also we know as codified in the Constitution, the President, when he's making the national address, has to present a report. I don't know if it is every year we have to have a new report on national values. This you say is since 2011. You'll clarify that. But let's hear from Dr. Frank Jenga.
I'm going to throw a spanner into the works.
Yes, please.
My proposition is that the concept of national values is a delusion.
It's a delusion?
It's a delusion to the extent that it presupposes that there is a point in time when we arrived at a tangible, objective something called national values.
Yes.
And when we got there, or when we will get there, we will all be able to touch it and feel it and say, this now is national values, and we can put it aside and live in and around it. Let me explain. When you think about it, you cannot conceptualize a national value without ab initio conceptualizing personal values. In other words, our nation consists of all of us as the elements that bring it about. If I was to understand better what this concept of national values is, I would start with myself. Not you, not the viewers, but with myself. What are the values that I, Frank Njenga, hold most dear and most important? The Reverend here has said that perhaps the core value that he has is his relationship with Christ. All right? And then once we create these building blocks and understand that these are the building blocks of our national values, then at the end, let me put it this way, national values for me is a destination. And the way we need to conceptualize it is through a process that says that at one point in time, having developed personal values, family values, community values, county values, we will end up at a place where we have a homogeneous proposition as intended in our Constitution. For today, unless you visualize like that, I'm afraid it's a concept that is delusional.
It's a concept that is delusional. So, Professor, you've been working on a delusional concept for the last how many years? You will tell us more about that. Yeah, right? But when we circle back, we'll hear from Dr. Wale Akinyemi. We want to take a short break right now. Yes, we promised our viewers before we took a short break that we'll circle back with you, Wale. Let's hear from you. National values. When you see that particular report, I don't know what happens in Nigeria. You can actually give us, also the national values of Nigerians.
Are you sure you want us to go there?
I want to know.
But I do agree that there is no destination because it constantly evolves. Many years ago, I was working with the Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Nigeria, and we did a research on the Nigerian national character. And this was, how did we behave before colonial rule? And it was very interesting what we came up with. If somebody was traveling, and I don't know how it was here, but if someone was traveling like from here to Nyeri, of course they are walking. Now, when they got to a place where they could buy fruits and things, even if they got there in the evening and the farmer is not there, those things are there, and there's a small place where you put they tell you, they've put the number of cowrie shells you're going to pay. So what you do, you just see the cowrie shells there and you put the equivalent there and you go with what you want to purchase. There was nobody to monitor, nobody to do anything. Now, if you try that today, They will take all the food you have put there. They will go and meet the farmer in his house and collect everything the farmer has. And so the question we were trying to find out an answer for is, what changed? And I'm going to address that later on. But going back to here, our national values covers how do we, it's a combination of personal values. You know, so how do we behave? What should we, the people, expect from the Kenyan entity? Or simply put, what is the Kenyan dream that governs how we behave? Because if we don't have something to look forward to, can we then be blamed for behaving the way we behave? The Bible says, without a vision, the people perish.
Without a vision, the people perish. All right, let's hear from Mary Mukindia. And in light, we can actually also juxtapose our talks with the death in the mud that is headlining the front page of a Daily Nation. If you may just, of course, look at that briefly. Look at this particular story. It's a story also of, you know, slighting away warnings, slighting away directives, because we're given to understand, as far as the reports are coming to the fore, that yes, the people or the Patel Dam, they were given a warning by Warsma, yeah, that is the water body, that this particular dam, of course, is dangerous. And we saw they slighted that particular warning, and this was last year in November, and see the outcome today. You've mentioned that people have been jailed, was it in Italy, because of this, yeah, because of such an incident where there was a dam burst and people were killed. But when it comes to obeying, you know, directives and authorities in this country, have we lost the plot? Mary?
Sometimes I don't feel qualified to discuss this in specific because I've not really caught up and read about it. But there are many incidents.
But given the background
yes,
have given you
yes,
about the directives
exactly.
and not really obeying.
Exactly, yeah, and even the houses that
complying.
have collapsed and so on. You know, I think that sometimes we talk about 20% of the problem, while 80% of the people, and in Kenya, the actual ordinary us in our own homes, in our own villages, in our own churches, our own school, generally we're not bad, we're not all that bad, but sometimes the 20%, and particularly at leadership level, at public accountability level, who are supposed to look after us and protect us, where that fails, then it looks like it is the whole country. But what I would say is that when you have consequences, not punished, you know, there are no consequences for doing something, that habit catches on, and then it becomes a culture, it becomes a practice, because that behavior is repeated and repeated, it becomes a habit, becomes a characteristic. And we have to go back a number of years, that if we do not, people do not bear the consequences of their actions, starting from the accident on the pastor that we talked about, talking about people who've stolen public money, people who have done, you know, whether it's morality and immorality, so many items that people start to say, why should I do it? If everybody gets away with it. If we see people, last time I was here, we were talking about billions, so people are not paid tax. If all these things, other people are getting away with it. If you're in the traffic, yesterday I was in traffic, some of the lights are working beautifully, but there's somebody who wants to cross that light, and it's red, but he thinks it's more important. Then you say one crosses, two crosses, then you say, why should I sit here? And the others are crossing and people are hooting at me. So it is that, what are the consequences when we don't follow the norm of what we accept of each other? We have schools where there's discipline, we have universities, we have colleges, we have homes. Why? Because there are consequences. When a child doesn't do something, or a pupil doesn't do something, or in a company, there is discipline. What happens when there's no discipline or consequences in a large corporation? People are fired. But in public life, which has a bigger influence because we're very dependent on the government to be able to set the laws and conditions within which we as a society have accepted to operate. There's some things that the people who man those borders, is people who've given authority.
Thank you.
If they don't man those borders, whether they're traffic lights, the justice courts,
All right.
the buildings, the technical ability, if there's no consequence, then we ourselves say we will go rogue, we will form our own.
Reverend Joya, we've had also Dr. Frank Jenga saying these national values are delusional. It is, and then he says it is a destination. Do you think the two hang together, the destination and the delusionment that he's talking about? You say that...
Okay, let me first of all begin where he says, I talked about predispositions, that we are trained since childhood. So predispositions are not personal, they are common public interests. That's why we go to school, to be trained, how to behave, how to think. Ideas come from that kind of culture. And I'm talking, when you say, you press people like you, when you say that there's a culture of impunity, of culture of corruption, you are lying. That's not a culture. That is uncultural. When the media is a corrupt institution also, by corrupting its own tools, language. To talk about that this is, when a person, people are not punished, you say that that's become a culture of impunity. That's not culture. It's deviation. It's deviant behavior. If I go to George Jaga's language of deviant behavior. It's not a cultural or culture of impunity. It is uncultural. So let me put it this way. I do agree that there must be predispositions, psychological makeup of every individual, the way he is brought up, that you cannot deviate from without being yourself feeling not being punished, as he says, only feeling uncomfortable, feeling not able to cope with yourself and with your life.
Yes.
If you are not behaving according to your culture. And I am saying that Western civilization used to call us uncivilized when we were civilized. Now it is time we have become very uncivilized by having no point of reference. When you behave, your point of reference is gain, it is profit, it is me. And that's how we can have an MP vote for increase 700%. That is subjecting public interest to private interest, subjecting common good to personal value. So I'm saying what you talking about value, those are not, for me, are not values. They are it's a corruption of values, and that's where we begin. So I do recommend that people read their books which have a record of past values, like the scriptures or some other books, or even in the fictions, we read Chinua Achebe or other people like Gogo Adiongo. You hear people being punished for acting inconsistently with their culture.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
But I think that sometimes, Reverend Joy, just to maybe clarify that, sometimes the ills or the things that ail us from a leadership point of view are then superimposed as if it's a national thing. We're 44 million or 46 million of us.
Yes.
I don't think we are all, uncivilized or all, doing these things. There are so many pockets, so many, places in our countries, millions of people who are behaving and living to their true natural values. But what we see is that the 20% really dilutes and messes the whole country and the reputation of a country. But as a country, we are so proud. There's so many things we're good at and have habits and have kingships and have good behavior and have culture. That's why so many things flourish. But we have, at times, leaderships at whatever level, whether it's at the public level or at the church level, where we have very bad leadership, at the church level of some sects or some places, or at family level, that then give us that opinion which is hype that the whole country is going down the tube. And that I don't think is perhaps a correct or an accurate assessment of the state of affairs, but it's hyped a lot because we tend to report the negative things that sometimes it can create a despondency in a nation that we think that we are all like that country.
Thank you. Professor Naomi Demba.
Well, for the purpose of our discussion, let me define two terms and then give a global picture where I think Kenya is and how this whole document was created. Number one is the value definition is a fundamental set of beliefs that drive choices and behavior. Secondly, Transparency International, there is this word corruption that we're using constantly. But the question is what it is. The Transparency International defined corruption as the abuse of entrusted powers for private gain. Mm-hmm. Now, going back, there is 3 periods of our history that is very crucial. 1895, Kenya became part of the British Protectorate. And at that particular time, there were literally over 40 distinct ethnic groups in this territory called Kenya. Mm-hmm. They have defined behavior ethnically and grouping, and they were distinct in nature. In 1920, we became independent, and therefore the British then imposed their values and culture on us. And if you go back to the British culture never existed. It was a conglomerate of several cultures, the Wales, the Irish, the Scottish, and the English.
Yes.
And so what we embraced at that particular time was not our own culture. And therefore we fought for many years, actually from Protectorate, 1895 to 1963, 68 years, on which we have our distinct culture. Then the British imposed their own culture. And then we tried to mix and then find our identity in that. Now, the document that was put together for me was a very important document in the journey, the way that Njega described it. We were to define strong national identity. What is it? Effective representation and leadership. 3, equitable allocation of resources and opportunity. And 4th, good governance. And lastly, sustainable development. Now, when I came in 2011, as I said, the group were very focused on creating a commission. And then I raised a question, what's the purpose of creating a commission on value? You know, I know that Saudi Arabia has a commission. I know that Iran has a commission. Mm-hmm. Now, is that the reason to create commission and define how women supposed to dress and all that kind of thing? So we were only 4 people who were opposed to the commission. And therefore, the report was then presented to President Kibaki and Honorable Raila, and they rejected the report.
Yeah, they rejected the report.
The report came back, and then I was asked by Ambassador Mina Mohammed and Mutula Kilonso to chair an expert committee.
The late. Yes.
That will now fine-tune this report.
Thank you.
And make it a national.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the details.
Let me just finally.
Because of interest of time, I want us just, because we have the report here, thank you. I know you've given us a snippet of the journey, how it went and how, but it is here. So we want to discuss what is in it, and you've raised some few points here. We'll come back to you. But let's hear from Dr. Frank Jenga. Looking at this report, there's so many reports we do have, like we're talking about national values. When it comes to state corporations, we have the Mwongozo Code as well. We have the Constitution with Article 10 itself. They are raising the question of identity. The national values defining its identity. Maybe we can also pick up on this. This is page 16, just to read a snippet of it so that we can discuss. It says, a nation's value defines its identity. They are fundamental beliefs of a nation guiding the choices, actions, and behavior of its citizens. They exact influence on the way citizens relate with each other and how communities engage with others. They impact the pace and direction of national development. Indeed, what will set Kenya apart as a great nation are the qualities of her people and the value they uphold. Question is, do we have an identity?
No.
First of all.
Oh, listen, I think we need to go back to the basics. And we need to not just talk words, but to understand and appreciate behavior. Because a lot of what this conversation is about, the expression of our national values, is behavioral. We emit certain bits of behavior that tell the world that that is a Kenyan emitting patriotism, expressing national unity, expressing certain bits of behavior. Now, I want to say two things with your permission. The first one is that are there jurisdictions in the world where national values can be identified? And the answer is yes. There are places like Singapore where there is the semblance of a behavior like not throwing chewing gum around, not throwing plastics around, maintaining and respecting the environment, bits and pieces of behavior that show respect, not only for the environment, for the constitution, but for other people. That's one. Secondly, and I think we've all alluded to this, is there a time in history when our people behaved in a manner that was respectful and that indicated? And of course there was a time. So, where did the rain begin to beat us? And I think Mary has hit the nail on the head on the one part. It is when emission of bad behavior was not met with any punishment. If I was to be allowed to hold this conversation to the benefit of the audience here,
yes,
I wouldn't go looking at all these complicated words. I would go back and say, shall we punish people who kill others in the streets? Shall we punish people who destroy the environment? Shall we it's very specific. Let us punish them on the one hand. On the other hand, I am not aware of any system in our land that rewards good behavior. Now, as a student of human behavior, I know there are two components. You can promote behavior, first of all, by punishing it, bad behavior, and you can also, like the dog, yes, promote good behavior by rewarding it. Give me a biscuit for emitting good behavior. I would like to narrow this conversation around national values to how do we punish the bad boys and girls? How do we reward good boys and girls? That way, we are acting as though we understand the way human behavior is evolving in nature.
And I would like to add
that just to start, we hear from Dr. Wall. We'll come to you, Mary.
All right. There was an incident that happened, because I agree with what Mary said, that why should I behave well when I read how people get away literally with murder? Why should I behave well when leaders flaunt something as simple as traffic laws? You know, and why should I? Now, there's an incident that happened in Nigeria many years ago when Babangida was there, and that was when corruption became institutionalized in Nigeria. There was this guy who was being deported from the UK. He was brought onto the plane in cuffs, okay? And the police brought him in, and he was deported to Nigeria. When he got out of the airport in Nigeria, there was a police escort waiting for him saying, "You're welcome, sir." Okay? And they drove him away with sirens and all that. "You're welcome, sir." Now, people see that. So why then should anybody behave well? Art of War, Sun Tzu, starts by saying, look, we are told, we tell these people, do this. And they laughed. The ladies laughed. And he said, all right, what's going to happen? I'm going to kill the king's favorite concubines.
Yes.
And he did it. It was not just words. He did it. And once that happened, the next order he gave, everybody obeyed. Many years ago, back again in Nigeria, there was an influx of Ghanaians into Nigeria. So the government then ejected a lot of Ghanaians, and there was a bag that they used to carry their stuff, which we now call Ghana Must Go. So these guys left in their multitudes back to Ghana. Today, the Nigerian elite are sending their children to school
In Ghana.
in Ghana. So what happened? Jerry Rawlings happened.
Yeah.
We seem to forget when Rawlings came in, one of the first things he did was to execute all his predecessors. Once that happened, the fear of Rawlings and the fear of God were the only two fears in the country. And things changed. Now, unless there are very visible consequences, we will keep having this discussion for many years to come. It's not about what is written on paper. Even the Bible says the law must be written in our hearts. How do we get to the place where the law of good behavior is written in the hearts of people? That's the place where we have taken ownership of it. And like Dr. Jenga said, you know, when you watch certain things in the US, you understand where patriotism comes from. That a soldier who showed acts of bravery at war is invited to the White House with his whole family and honored and all that. I have never seen anything like that in our continent.
No.
You know? So, if the good I do is not celebrated, I know we're expected to do good. But if the good I do is not celebrated, there's no motivation.
There's no. We'll come to you, Mary. Let's hear
Yeah,
from.
just a quick one. Yeah?
Let's hear from Rev. We'll
Yeah.
come to you. We'll just go
I just
sequentially.
wanted to reinforce what he is saying. When I was a minister at St. Andrews, a person came and disrupted the service. That his son died at Rangata on the roadside.
Yes.
He was killed by robbers, and then he came and he went to the mortuary. He was asked for about 4,000 shillings to see his son in the mortuary. So he came to the church, disrupted the service, crying. I remember his name, we called Mwanyumba. And he said, Reverend Joy, I want to see my son. I left the service, went to the mortuary with him, took him. I was told, pay for him 4,000, he doesn't. Then I went to the police station just near Kenyatta Hospital, took 4 policemen, went and arrested the man in charge of the mortuary, the city mortuary, put him in my car boot. We took him to the police station, we locked him up, and charged with abetting a crime, bribery. That is in record. From that time, I stayed in that church for another 6 years. And I used to go there to take and observe people coming to look for their people, how they have behaved. And everything, they would salute the ordinary people coming to ask for help. So I say that I agree with you. When I went to where Lawrence, I was there in the coast, Cape Coast, where you used to shoot people and they fall into the sea. Yeah. That was enough to shock the nation to behave. And I don't want to do that because I believe in the sacredness of life. Life is sacrosanct. But I would rather, all these people, from not to mention simply Patini alone, and releasing all those people, if I didn't believe in sacrosanct of life sacrosancy,
Yes.
I would ask for them a firing squad right now.
Right. We shall discuss about that, the sacrosanct, the sanctity of life and capital punishment. Where do we leave it? But let's hear from Mary. Mary, yes.
No, I just wanted to add on what Dr. Jenga said, about, yes, punishment and reward. And I wanted to add one thing, an education.
An education.
Because I know when our school we used to have civics.
Yes.
Previously, culturally, there were all these repercussions and the consequences used to take place within a society. If you kill somebody, each of the tribe, the Akamba, the Kikuyu, the Tuki, they had their systems, and within that culture, people grew up knowing what is the right behavior. What do people value? They value relationships, they value kingships, they value marriage, they value, you know, property, they value good. And then those things were then punished or rewarded because you got societal acclaim.
Yes.
So for me, education, that component, and it shows, do we really believe in these things? You go back and say, where is the curriculum? From kindergarten, where are those things? And then talking about the reward in terms of what, Professor here said, I think it's Akiwala who has said, sometimes you go for this, when you see the honors lists, what is rewarded is position. As soon as you hit a certain position, PS, CS, or whatever, you're rewarded. As soon as you're a big business, you're rewarded. There are some rewards that are given for people who are in CSR, but there are those lower, whatever, and they're not shown out the way you have the Queen's List and the Knights, whatever, though UK obviously also have a lot of those political bigwigs. But it is that kind of, what are we rewarding? What are we showing people? Who is being lifted up in society?
Who is being lifted up? A good question.
Because the Bible says that where your treasure is, there your heart lies.
Yes.
And if you see where we put our treasure, what we lift up, that's really where our heart is.
Thank you.
The Matatu man that returned somebody's money.
Yes.
That should be the big story, you know, because those are the kind of things that, wow, if I do this, you know, and then let's reward it. Thank God we heard, I think Churchill is taking care of his accommodation.
Yes.
But his education, it should be more than that. And the very important thing is, you see, family shame was a huge deterrent to bad behavior. Family shame. So, but where is the family today? Where are the fathers? Where is the home? Because one of the easiest ways to ensure good behavior is to rebuild families.
Yes.
I believe so.
Thank you. Maybe from Nomi Damba, we're looking at this particular report because you've actually mentioned effective leadership, equitable allocation of resources, effective representation and leadership, and also strong national identity. These are the key interventions that I hear, first of all. Lack of strong national identity has been worsened by negative ethnicity, it says from the report. Class disparities and impunity. It has led to circumstances in which many Kenyans feel should change as citizens. It has also led to strong expressions of competing identities and loyalties that have undermined national cohesion and unity. Strong national identity will be achieved by developing innovative strategies that promote the inclusion of values of patriotism, national unity, and the rule of law. And this is where we get lost in this, barrage of words that, they're very flowery on reports. But now when it comes to actually putting the rubber down on the road, we are lost. What will be the strategies? Then again, now you'll have a strategy book on how to develop innovative strategies to promote inclusion and value patriotism, national unity, and the rule of law. We have a committee right now.
Yeah,
we know the joint committee of Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta as well.
Right.
And this will get lost inside there as well.
This was fundamentally a very important development and a very important document, which is not found in many countries. You know, it doesn't exist in Britain. It does not exist in many countries. But we try to take the Constitution and redefine the Constitution to everybody, so that we can actualize it and make it happen. We talk about punishing and rewarding. The British punished and the British rewarded. And they had control, they had discipline. And the movement from one place to another was controlled. And so the point is, Mary talked about people running in front of light. I'm one of those people who stop at red light and they tell it turns green. You can scream what you want behind me, but I will not move. And so the point is, we need to reach that culture, the point that Frank was talking about in Singapore, where people don't spit, throw things everywhere and expect somebody to clean. So this is a very important document if you unveil it and understand it. The point is, what we did as an expert committee was not to appoint a commission. We rejected the idea of a commission, and we said, let this be led by the three forms of government. the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive, and that the president once a year will go before parliament and present a report. That is what the president just did.
All right.
But let me just cap there. We have a national anthem, which is very important. We say, "O God of all creation, bless this our land and nation, and let liberty be our shield and defender." Now, we say it all the time. Who actualize it? When it comes to America, people cry when the national anthem sings. Well, let's just tell you. It is fundamentally deep inside the American psyche.
Thank you.
When are we going to do that in this country and in this country?
All right. I want maybe to circle on the issue of punishment and rewards. Because it seems, and you've raised this, Dr. Njenga, in this country, it is actually the opposite, right? So we actually celebrate and reward the offenders and punish the people whose rights have been offended, right? And how can we change this narrative? Because it seems where you have the wherewithal, you have influence, you have power, you can actually buy justice in this country. And we have an editorial cartoon here. I'll just run it by you, of course, Munene, which actually really shows this, because yes, the clammy fingers of corruption reaching deeper and now also tipping the scale of justice in this country. We seem to reward oppositely. The person who has been offended will get punished. The one who, case in point, is now in the public domain of Pastor Nganga, and that ruling of from the court. And they're saying this was a sloppy job that was done by the police. Yes, if there was a system that actually was wanting weakness in the chain, and someone who has been, rightly violated is shortchanged, what then? Do we just let it pass off like that? Because, yeah, as it says, that is a culture, which is also a misnomer maybe from the media, as alluded by
one of our national
Reverend
values,
Joy. Yes.
Is the rule of law. All right, the rule of law, it's remotely related to our constitution.
Yes.
But is intimately linked to the practice of the administration of the rule of law. It's not enough to have pieces of paper like this one, or like laws written and kept and held in court and everywhere else, when we do not practice the rule of law. Now, there are institutions in this country, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, that we donate our sovereign authority to exercise and to deliver the rule of law for us on our behalf. I think that perhaps what we should be doing here is to address the judiciary and the executive and to tell them, you are sleeping on your job. Because really, the example you have given, and I don't have much information about that particular pastor, sickens me to my stomach. Because it tells me that even people who are supposed to be men of God, yes, are at the forefront of the corruption, and the word corruption is the correct one here, of our national values. Now, that's one thread. I think we must more forcefully and clearly say to the executive and to the president and say, this will not do. People will not be allowed to break the written law. And we want to see those people whose names we know, who are the masters of impunity, face the consequences of their action. That's one side of the coin for me, and I think the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive must be put to account by ourselves here in this particular regard. In fact, I think, Reverend Joy and others sitting here, that is our national duty to go that way. The second thing I would like to say is this. I have a serious problem in addressing national values, because this is my tie and I like it very much. This is my glasses. These are my things, and I look after them because I value them. When you go anywhere, in a slum, in the leafy suburbs, what we do around our homes is we clean them. We make sure that the shrubs are not growing too much, there is not too much chafu. When you leave your gate and get into what is called public space, you get plastics, you throw it away, you go onto a tree and urinate on it. You actually molest anything that is not mine. And I think part of the reason I like about the 4 big pillars of this particular government is a creation of a sense of ownership. When you own a piece of shamba, when you own a piece of house, when you own a piece of dress, when you own a piece of anything and it is yours, you will look at it. We will have national values when we create a greater sense of ownership of this. And that for me is a strategy, is a conscious move of creating increasing sense of ownership of our school, of our community, of our Republic of Kenya. And I think that is, rather than create more and more words,
yes,
I think we need to have a conversation and promote and create ownership of all that is ours, culminating at the pinnacle in our national values.
Right. Let's see from Mary Mukindia, first of all, because you talk about punishing people and you believe, this is Reverend Joy talks about punishing people and believing in the sanctity of life. And capital punishment. We know from China, when it comes to corruption, they're really hard on it. People go, they go to the Galletons, we know that, of course, also they jailed for life. When it comes to sanctity of life, capital punishment, where do we hang as a country on that particular kill? Do we go full throttle for their lives so that it can be a case for many who are embroiled in corruption? Until we nail one, then people will not really have a learning point. Or how do we handle this? Because it seems we'll talk a good game about corruption. The president, of course, you saw him expressing frustration during the private sector meetings with him at the State House about corruption. We clap on corruption. On State House Summit, he's really talked about corruption. We have a new report on national values. Still, corruption is a big issue as well. But it seems we're just talking good game about these things, but when it comes down to the wire, nothing really happens.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think I'm more for life sentences as opposed to capital punishment, even for major, and there are major crimes which are almost amounting to death when you have people, selling chalk for medicines,
yes,
people who are contaminating foodstuffs when standards are not adhered for, in terms of measuring foodstuffs that are going to the public. But I think there are also other ways that you can cause, Adam was talking about, public embarrassment, where you have, for example, and I talked about this last time, you have people from the PSC reports who have been condemned for mismanaging parastatals. They're in those reports. They should never hold public office, people in government. But where is a database with their pictures that you can actually go when you Google somebody and you're able to see? The banking law has people like, we have what we call PEPs, publicly, politically exposed persons. The things that people have, is there a place like the way FBI posts all the pictures of people who should not hold public office, yes, they've been accused of this, and actually not just accused, convicted in a court of law or through a public report. There isn't anywhere, if I search you, that I can actually find you were chief accountant in Malindi County Council, you were measured in this, and you stole this money, and you've been, been said not to hold public office. So there are very many ways that you can do it, including the media. Investigative journalism used to be very strong in this country. I don't know what has happened. Look at what is happening in America. One of the most corrupt states in the world. That's why I'm not for this kind of corruption indices. The war in, whether it's Libya, Iraq, Iran, the munitions companies and what they do with the presidencies of Bush and others, what is happening today, as you can see with Cohen, with the, with money that's being taken, and the lobby groups that are actually licensed. There's a lot more corruption there. The press is very active in repeatedly exposing these things until people don't want to see you, they say, oops, you were mentioned in this kind of thing. And it affects people, but we kind of tend to wipe through it. So I think that consequences are for these people not to be appointed public position, to be exposed by the media, and to actually be able to clean up the judiciary enough and the police investigative. But you see, there's been some very good things done. Imagine the old immigration. It's changed. Look at Huduma. People used to say, oh, immigration, do you know somebody to help me? It's no longer. You can go there, queue, and get your service. NHIF, things are improving. Because, you know, there are places where things are improving. You're getting service when you demand it. I think we also need to say, how do we educate our people? Because the civil society used to be very strong in helping the ordinary people voice our complaints. What has happened with this pastor? I haven't called anybody I know. I bet maybe some of us here haven't written, called, and agitated and said, this is wrong. So when we are also silent, I think we're capable. And the press and the civil society, to me, in terms of, if you look 20 years ago, 15 years ago, have taken a back step. I don't know why, in being able to push this agenda and hold government accountable. Because some in government, I believe, want to do it, and some pockets do. But there are others who then don't do. How do you hold everybody accountable?
Thank you. Let's talk about our political appointments and rewards, because we are actually on punishment and rewards still. Because even if we actually put all these faces in the media, spread them on the covers of the papers, print media, we have their bites also on electronic media, we see as also time tapers off, people forget, they'll be actually appointed and given positions, you know, by the same government. While they full know well that this and so this person and that particular guy has been embroiled in corruption, right? We can see many of the boards that they've been appointed to. What does that really tell also the common mwananchi in terms of fighting that corruption? That you're speaking from both sides of the mouth. You say today, no, we'll go hard on these guys who are on corruption. We are frustrated on this. But tomorrow, you will appoint the same person who was embroiled in corruption, a scandal. There's so many that we have in this country of the gates, the kitchen gate. But you see, he's a chairman of that particular board of this parastatal. You tell me, Reverend Njoya,
Chapter
do you
6.
think we are confusing? Aren't we for confusing our children at home?
I think you are now talking about Kenya, not about ethics and kasha, where appointments are based on distributive, what you call the distribution of justice, not collective justice, not personal morality and integrity, even though our constitution talked about integrity, because if you want to appoint somebody, you must take into the criteria. We have 42 tribes, and you must balance. So the criteria for appointment is no longer morality and kasha. It is how to achieve ethnic balance.
But there are good people in each tribe.
You don't know all of them. If you are the one appointing. For me, I was used to be the co-convener and the spokesman of NCC. So I know people from every constituency in Kenya of that time. So if you ask me to appoint a good government in Kenya, I can more than anybody else I know in Kenya. Because I've been in every corner of Kenya, from Wajir to Migori, everywhere. But I'm saying that kind of exposure, you have to live long like me to be that exposed. The people who lead government and who do appointment haven't got enough time to have that exposure of appointing people on the criteria of knowing them and knowing their integrity. So that's one I say. And again, they have to ask their campaigners and their voters who to appoint. So the question of criteria of appointment has nothing to do with integrity. It has to do with another criteria of achieving parity and balance. Because I wouldn't like to not to say something about my identity and where I base my integrity, because it's very important to be exemplary in many ways. I'm a Calvinist. To be Calvinist is to believe in the corrective behavior, not personal. To be mutually accountable in a peer group. I don't mean a peer pressure. You need to be corrective accountable. We call it a doctrine of priesthood of all believers, that when we serve, We are not serving ourselves, we are serving the common good. We are serving the public interest. That doctrine is what informs me that if you want to act, you must act on a collective conscience, not what is going to benefit you. Selflessness, that's what I'm calling it. Self-sacrifice. And I think those values of selflessness and self-sacrifice and giving yourself for the others, putting others before you, their interests before yours, I think those values are part of Akasha, part of my belief.
All right. Dr. Wale, then we'll come to...
Reverend, I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
Now, this behavior we're talking about, is it a reaction? Is good behavior a response to something else? Or do we just initiate good behavior? Because when JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, in fact, the country was doing something for them at that point. So, I think it's very, very important, because if we are telling people, behave this way, all right, and we have not created an environment that supports that behavior, we are still wasting our time. The reason corruption can never, the war against corruption cannot be won as long as the environment that breeds corruption is still left intact.
She said, she began her very first statement about family, about fellowship, about collective behavior, collectivity, common behavior, collective consciousness, not you as alone. That's what identity is. Identity is not who you are, but who we are. Now, when you have no family structure, no mechanisms for enforcement and the reinforcement of your behavior, you can't follow it on your own. So I'm saying, what we are lacking is creating structures and institutions that reinforce common behavior, good behavior, what you call a
what do you mean? What do you mean we're lacking in structures and institutions? What is actually the sole function of the National Cohesion and Integration?
That is not a commission, and neither is it a cohesion. It's a waste of money.
It's a waste of money. So why do if it's a waste of money, we need to ask ourselves first of all, why is it a waste of money in the first place?
Even if it's a waste of money, they don't reinforce behavior. They try to react to behavior. They are not reinforcing any behavior.
All right.
They are reacting.
But yeah, you point accusatory fingers to this institution, but they react. What is the church doing? Because all these values that we're talking about and you're espousing here this morning, all these values, they come from the church.
But can I say this? Because I think we're about to lose our thread.
Yes.
Our behavior in relation to corruption is a mathematical calculation. It's a mathematical calculation as follows. What will it cost me to emit corrupt behavior? X. What are the likely consequences if I am caught completely? Y. What is greater, X or Y? It's a simple piece of calculation. It is more cost effective, it is more profitable to be corrupt than not to be corrupt. So when I go in the business of being a corrupt person, I have already anticipated what the policeman will do, what the judge will do, and the fact that I will never go to jail. What I have said before, and I'd like to say again here, is that we need to reverse that calculation. Reverse the calculation in two ways. Either there is some uncertainty as to the outcome. In this case, there is definite outcome that is known. You will bribe your way out of that corruption. In the alternative, or shall we say additionally, it must be the case that when you are caught, it is more painful than the enjoyment. If we look at it as a mathematical calculation, we will be able to look at it and say, this is the punishment for this particular behavior. The punishment is greater than the benefit. That's the way to deal with it.
Right, thank you.
And
Let's hear
just
from
add
Noah.
quickly on that, because you've seen it, even time is also part of the cost. If it's going to be more efficient to be able to give something, then you will do it. But if it's time efficient, and you can see it in KRA, once they brought in the iTax, and it became very efficient for you to put in your taxes, whatever, it's done automatically because of the efficiency. You have less problems and more tax being paid because now you don't have to file those forms, walk to times towers, queue. So you can have it in terms of also the efficient systems, which we have seen with all this digital media to allow people to do it.
Right. Nomi Damba.
There is two things which are interchangeable. One of them is awareness, and two, collective responsibility. Awareness, you go self-awareness, you go in 3 stages. The first stage is awareness, the next stage is commitment, and the final stage is ownership, which is the highest stage. Now, what happened in South Korea, the president of South Korea know very well that I don't not necessarily have to be corrupted, but just the sheer understanding that I'm being influenced in a corrupt way, okay, the punishment and the consequence is very serious. And where we lose all the time in this country is we behave like warthogs, the animal. What happened last minute, they don't remember.
Okay, we're winding up right now. Of course, I can see a lot of reactions here as we're winding up. I know, just tickled me there. But the question would be again, as we're winding up, we have this report. Collectively, as a country, it seems maybe people have taken it to be the norm. That yes, corruption is with us, and there's nothing much we can do. Your closing remarks, Dr. Frank Njenga. It's not only corruption, because when we look at this, I'll walk to my touchscreen and look at this particular editorial cartoons that we're talking about. This is, you know, scaling or tipping the scale of justice via corruption. You'll come to when we have the story also of IEBC, yeah, and Wanjiku having a conversation with IEBC. We don't seem to know what the promise is with our elections. We keep going in cycles. Manuals versus electronic system. We procure new systems and register new voters every time. We create new laws while keeping old and troublesome ones to benefit the few. Then we have also the chair saying, indeed, IBC is ready to conduct a referendum. All this, you gloss over all these issues. But when you come to IBC, what is a real problem? Still, we'll see the clammy fingers of corruption as well. You can come back now to also the editorial cartoon that we do have here. I think is the star. What is happening with the Patel Dam?
I think the you're inviting me to repeat myself, which I have no problem doing.
Yeah, briefly.
To say this, Mr. Patel or whoever, the MCA, whoever it is,
yes,
has done the mathematical calculation and knows that by pointing to the sky, that's cheap, all right? And he will continue running. The MCA is, we all do math. What we must do is to create a relationship between our behavior with the dam or with the IEBC or whatever it is, with the consequences, deliberately and consciously. So that, for example, and I don't know the fact about this one, if you tell Wanjiku you can run a referendum with 3 commissioners and you're supposed to have 7, there must be consequences to that. That, all I'm saying, I'm not talking about the flood, I'm not talking about IBC, I am saying that let's go back to the drawing board and start off by saying, what have we prescribed in law as the consequences of emitting this type of behavior? And the executive then has the duty and responsibility of ensuring that that behavior is punished accordingly.
Thank you. 20 seconds, Mary, 20 seconds.
I would really say our practices, traits, and culture is what really defines us as a people. That is our value, because it exerts influence on how we behave. There are guidelines for this behavior everywhere. Some of these things we are saying national values are outputs. They are not really a value. And for me, those guidelines of behavior, as we've said, if there's no punishment or reward and we don't teach it, we're not going to go anywhere.
Reverend Timothy Njoya, 20 seconds.
I will finally define democracy as a common value in Kenya. Core value. I'm saying democracy is the obligation of everybody to take care of everybody. That's democracy. The obligation of everybody to take care of everybody. It is also the right of everybody to be taken care of by everybody. So it has two sides.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've not finished.
20 seconds are over.
It is to put common good before private good. Putting common interest and public interest before personal interest.
Thank you. Nomi Damba.
3 questions that every Kenyan citizen need to ask themselves.
Very briefly.
1 is, who am I? And 2, what is the desired outcome do we need for our nation? And thirdly, what is my role in it?
Thank you. Wale?
All right, first of all, I would repeat myself again. The law must come out of the paper and must be written in our hearts. If it is not written, if we don't get it into the heart by instruction, we have to get it there by force. And I also have a definition of democracy, and that is where the child of a nobody can become somebody without knowing anybody. And then my definition of a working state is where a person who is somebody can be reduced to nobody in spite of knowing everybody. Case study, South Korea. Thank you.
Korea.